Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something absolutely critical, what we're calling the Global Compliance Gauntlet for 2025. We've got a stack of documents here, regulations, analysis, all pointing to how three big regulatory waves, two from the EU, one from the US, are changing everything for third-party vendor risk.
That's right. And it's really putting this issue, third-party risk management, or TPRM, front and center for the C-suite. It's not just paperwork anymore. This is fundamentally a global reaction to some major stresses we're seeing: escalating cyber threats, geopolitical shifts, and honestly, a huge reliance on third-party tech.
So our mission today is to cut through that complexity for you. We're digging into the EU's DORA, that's the Digital Operational Resilience Act, and NIS2, the Network and Information Systems Directive. And then over in the US, the SEC's new cybersecurity disclosure rule. Understanding how these fit together, or sometimes don't, well, that's crucial for 2025.
Absolutely. It's the key to staying compliant and, frankly, resilient.
And look, navigating this kind of complex global web, it demands really reliable, up-to-date resources. That's why many teams turn to our sponsor, www.compliancehub.wiki, to get that precise guidance they need. We thank them for their support. Okay, let's set the stage first. Why now? Why is third-party risk suddenly this massive global focus for regulators? What's the trigger?
Well, it's not just one trigger. It's more like a perfect storm, really. You've got a couple of big drivers. First, there's systemic instability. Everything's digital now, which means things happen faster. Think about the bank runs in 2023, market swings, digitalization speeds it all up.
Okay.
And you combine that speed with, frankly, soaring global debt. Public debt's projected over 93% of global GDP this year. Regulators are getting nervous about overall stability.
So fragility and speed, that's the environment. But how does that connect directly to, say, my software vendor?
That's where the second driver comes in.
Yeah.
The third-party dependency crisis. We saw it starkly, didn't we? That huge IT outage back in July 2024, caused by just one tech provider. It basically ground parts of the global economy to a halt.
Yeah, that was huge. It showed how reliant we are.
Exactly. It proved how one failure in a critical supplier, especially in tech, can cascade through the whole financial system, and then layer on top the geopolitical stuff, more sanctions, more export controls. That creates real business interruption risk, often coming from your vendors in different parts of the world.
Got it. So the regulations aren't just about pure cybersecurity anymore. It's about this dangerous reliance on external companies whose failure could be catastrophic. It's cyber risk plus business risk, all wrapped up together. And that's why TPRM is now firmly a boardroom issue, not just an IT checklist.
Precisely. It's about operational resilience in a much broader sense.
All right, let's pivot to the EU then. They've got this double header coming online, DORA and NIS2. Are they basically the same thing, or?
They're related, definitely complementary, but quite different in scope and application. DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, that's a regulation. Big difference. It applies directly across the EU from January 17, 2025. No local transposition needed.
And its focus is narrow.
Very focused. Exclusively the financial sector. So banks, insurers, investment firms. And it gets deep into ICT risk management, serious resilience testing, like threat-led penetration testing for the big players, and very specific rules for third-party risk.
Okay, so DORA is financial sector specific. What about NIS2?
NIS2 is the broader play. It's a directive, so member states had until October 2024 to write it into their own national laws. And its scope is huge. 18 different critical sectors. We're talking energy, transport, healthcare, digital services, even some manufacturing. Much wider net.
So if I'm a bank, DORA applies for my ICT risk instead of NIS2.
Generally, yes. Where DORA has specific rules for financial entities on things like ICT risk or third-party risk, those rules take precedence. They are considered lex specialis. But NIS2 still sets a baseline for many other critical sectors and includes strong mandates around supply chain security for everyone it covers.
Okay, now this is where I think it gets really transformative for vendor relationships, the contracts. What exactly do these rules force companies to put into their vendor contracts? It sounds like a big shift in power.
It absolutely is. This is probably the most immediate operational headache, especially under DORA. Financial firms must review and, where necessary, repaper their contracts with critical ICT providers.
Repaper meaning rewrite or add amendments?
Both, potentially. The contracts have to include specific mandatory clauses now, things like clear descriptions of services where the data is physically located, but crucially, the right for the financial entity and its regulators to conduct audits and inspections of the vendor. That's huge.
Whoa, okay. So the vendor has to agree up front to let the regulator in.
Essentially, yes. for critical services. Plus, clear rules on incident notification, assistance obligations, and really detailed termination clauses and exit strategies. You need a plan to get out if things go wrong.
That audit right and the pre-planned exit strategy, that completely changes the negotiation leverage, doesn't it? The vendor has to accept much more accountability.
No question. The burden of proving resilience shifts significantly. And NIS2 echoes this, maybe less granularly, but with the same intent. It mandates that organizations have a formal program for supply chain risk. That means doing regular security checks on your suppliers. And it means putting contractual obligations on them too, things like maintaining basic security hygiene, MFA, patching, reporting incidents quickly.
And there are teeth to this for management.
Oh, yes. Both frameworks emphasize senior management accountability. NIS2 is particularly blunt about it. It mentions potential temporary bans on C-level executives running the company if there are serious failings, and fines, of course, up to 10 million euros or 2% of global turnover for the big entities under NIS2.
Wow. Okay, managing all that, finding every critical ICT contract, checking it, amending it, tracking it, especially against those EU deadlines. That's a monumental task. You'd absolutely need a centralized, reliable way to manage that knowledge. It makes sense why teams rely on resources like our sponsor, www.compliancehub.wiki, for exactly this kind of challenge.
It's the kind of task that spreadsheets just won't handle effectively, not at this scale.
All right, let's switch continents. The U.S. approach with the SEC cybersecurity disclosure rule. It feels different, maybe less about how you manage risk and more about just telling people when something bad happens.
That's a fair characterization. The SEC's focus is primarily on transparency and speed for investors. It's less prescriptive on controls, but the urgency is palpable. Two main things here. First, the one everyone talks about, the 4-day clock.
Right.
Public companies have to report a material cybersecurity incident on a Form 8K within 4 business days of deciding it is material.
And that materiality decision seems like the tricky part. It's not always obvious, especially in the middle of a crisis, who makes that call.
Exactly. It's tough. Materiality isn't just about dollars lost, though that's part of it. It's what a reasonable investor would think is important. So that includes qualitative things too, reputational damage, potential litigation, disruption to the business.
So it's a judgment call.
It is, but it needs to be a fast and well-documented one. The SEC says companies need a process involving IT, security, legal, finance to make that call without unreasonable delay.
Oh, and you can't just ignore small incidents. If you have a series of related smaller breaches that add up to something big, you need to aggregate them for that materiality assessment.
Okay, so the pressure on the third-party risk team here is intense. If a key vendor gets hit, how do you make sure that doesn't cause your company to miss that 4-day SEC deadline?
This is where the SEC rule, while not explicitly mandating TPRM controls like DORA, has a huge indirect impact. Because the second part of the rule requires companies to disclose annually their processes for managing cyber risks.
Oh, okay.
And they have to specifically talk about how they handle risks coming from third-party service providers and supply chain issues. That puts TPRM squarely in the spotlight for investors and the board.
So you can't just say we send out a questionnaire once a year anymore. Not if you want to be credible, no. If a vendor incident happens, you have potentially just 96 business hours from determining its material to report it. An annual checkup is useless for that. You need near real-time visibility into your critical vendor security posture.
Which means continuous monitoring becomes basically essential for SEC compliance too, not just for DORA.
Absolutely. It pushes you towards continuous monitoring using things like security ratings, having really tight integration between your incident response and your vendor management. You need those internal thresholds for what might constitute a material risk from a vendor and the data flowing to make that call quickly. It forces TPRM to be much more data-driven.
So, okay, we have DORA demanding specific contract terms and tests in the EU.
Yeah.
We have NIS2 broadening security mandates across critical sectors there. And the SEC demanding rapid disclosure and process transparency in the U.S. If you're listening and you're facing this, this global regulatory convergence, what are the most important, highest impact things you should be doing right now to build a unified strategy?
Yeah, it's a lot. But when you boil down the recommendations from, various consultancies like from EY, BitSight, Isaac Hack, 4 key actions really stand out across all these regulations. First, and maybe most importantly, elevate accountability. Make sure cybersecurity risk, including third-party risk, is formally owned, approved, and overseen by senior management and the board. NIS2 and DORA demand it explicitly. The SEC rules imply it through the disclosure requirements. It has to be a regular boardroom conversation framed in terms of business impact, not just technical jargon.
Makes sense. Get leadership buy-in and oversight first. 1 second.
Second, shift to continuous monitoring. Seriously, the era of relying solely on static point-in-time vendor assessment is over. It's just not adequate anymore. You need tools or services. Security ratings are a common example to track your vendor's cybersecurity performance routinely. This helps meet DORA's resilience needs and helps you avoid nasty surprises that could trigger an SEC filing.
Right. Know your vendor's posture in near real time. Okay, third.
Third is about testing that resilience. Test resilience with your vendors. Don't just review their paperwork, conduct actual tests. DORA specifically calls for digital operational resilience testing. This should include scenarios simulating major disruptions caused by critical third parties. Think vendor down exercises or vendor data breach simulations.
So practice for the worst-case scenario involving your suppliers.
Exactly. And make sure your own incident response plans explicitly cover these vendor-related failure scenarios.
Okay. Accountability, continuous monitoring, joint testing. What's the fourth key action?
The fourth is looking ahead slightly. Govern AI risk. AI adoption is accelerating everywhere, right? And that brings new risks, often via third parties. Think about data leakage through AI models, prompt injection attacks, risks from using third-party AI services. You need an AI strategy, sure, but your governance framework, especially TPRM, needs to adapt now to assess and manage these emerging AI-related supply chain risks.
That's a really crucial point. AI adds another complex layer to that third-party landscape. So across all these actions, accountability, monitoring, testing, AI governance, the common element seems to be needing rigorous processes, solid documentation, and quick access to the right compliance information, which again underscores the value of having dependable resources. We encourage you to check out our sponsor, www.compliancehub.wiki, to help streamline navigating this complex regulatory environment.
Yeah, having that structured knowledge readily available is going to be key for teams trying to implement all this effectively.
So wrapping this up, it feels like the big takeaway is that compliance isn't just a local checkbox exercise anymore. It's become this core component of global business resilience, and it's being driven by these powerful transparency and accountability demands stretching from the U.S. to the EU.
That's exactly it. The challenge for every global company now is balancing innovation, adopting AI, using complex digital supply chains with mitigating the very real, often systemic risks that come with it. Compliance, particularly around operational and digital resilience, is really the foundation now for earning and keeping trust, especially in the capital markets.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. We see this push for standardization and operational resilience through DORA and NIS2, the SEC rules. But at the same time, we see inconsistent adoption of other global standards like Basel 3.1 in banking, or the ongoing fragmentation of how different countries are regulating digital assets. These also impact a firm's operational base. So the question is, how can global firms truly achieve standardized operational resilience when the wider international regulatory landscape underneath them keeps shifting and fragmenting? Something to consider. That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.